Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. Well, I can't believe it. We've now had Starlink for a full year. So in this month's update, I'll give a brief summary of the changes over the year and some lessons learned. Then we'll get into a couple of interesting news items and my usual performance metrics. Let's dive in. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been a year since Gary the FedEx guy delivered our dish in March of 2021. It was very easy to install, but I immediately discovered there were far too many tree obstructions in my initial location and moved it the very next day. My second location on the other end of the cottage was much better, but still had trees obstructing to the west. While I considered moving it a bit higher, there were trade-offs there as well. So I've left it here at the end of the cottage and learned to live with the occasional obstruction outage. If you haven't received your dish yet, the lesson here is use the obstruction checker in the app to diligently scout out your best mounting location. The app is much better now than it was a year ago and will give you a pretty good idea of what to expect. That said, as more and more satellites go up and the Starlink software has improved, my outages have dropped dramatically. When I first installed my dish, there were about 800 satellites in service. Now there are nearly 1,600 in service, double the coverage in 1 year. I used to get outages about 2 minutes a day, simply due to no satellites being in sight. Well, I haven't seen that outage in months now. And as this graph shows, my outage time per day has dropped by nearly 6 times. And as we'll see later, the outages we do have are shorter and less impacting. Mind you, it hasn't all been a smooth ride. We did have that 90-minute global outage in January. That was a bit nerve-wracking. Speed-wise, the performance has been quite variable over the year, as you can see in this graph. The red line being the average download speed each month. But if you ask Excel to put a trend line across there, it comes out almost flat at 112 megabits per second. And again, while the average over the months has been all over the place, the average during any given month is also quite variable. I'll show you some histograms later. Suffice it to say that with Starlink, you need to accept the fact that the speed will generally be fantastic, and let's face it, for rural or remote internet, 100 megs is utterly mind-blowing. But you need to expect that that speed will change from one moment to the next. All of these improvements over the year have driven a number of changes in my own network configuration as well. For the first few months, I was running a configuration that allowed me to retain my Bell Canada DSL landline as a backup. It was pretty complicated and didn't really help since it didn't automatically switch over during Starlink outages, which were pretty frequent in those days, several times per hour. Since then, I've dropped the backup internet and have been exclusively on Starlink for 9 months now. So I was able to remove the second router from my network and connect my wired network directly into the Starlink router's aux port. I use 2 Ubiquiti access points to transmit to my wireless devices. I upgraded my archaic security camera system to a set of modern Blink wireless cameras and absolutely love them. They're easy to install, configure, and access remotely. In other news, there have been a number of items in the larger Starlink universe that are interesting to share. First, of course, was the great humanitarian gesture Elon made by quickly providing Ukrainians with truckloads of free dishes and turning on access in Ukraine. Apparently 2 days turnaround from the request to delivery of the dishes, which is amazing, even for Gary. And there was a similar delivery to help with flooding in Australia. All of this points to the versatility of this kind of internet access and the amazingly generous principles of Elon and the Starlink company. Good stuff. Seemingly tied into this is the fact that roaming has now been enabled in some Starlink dishes. This allows the dishes to be moved around without the current, geo-locked restrictions. Great for emergency situations, of course, but also great for folks in RV vehicles and campers. Well, campers that don't want to leave the internet behind, at least. My own system does not seem to have roaming enabled, but I've heard of others that do. You can check in the detailed debug screen available from the advanced settings in the app. Okay, let's move to my performance metrics. First up is dropout events per hour. I define a dropout as an outage over 11 seconds, enough to be noticeable on an MS Teams or Zoom call. The great news is that March was another super month with only 0.13 events per hour, which means I might experience one during a typical working day. Only about a third of these are obstruction related, which is good news also. I guess I'll need to change the scale of this graph next month, but I thought I'd leave it as it is for my 1-year anniversary to show the incredible improvement since May of last year when I started tracking these metrics. My second metric is total outage minutes per day, as reported by the Starlink app. Again, pretty good performance with 2.5 minutes of outage per day on average. Now, I did have one day, March the 7th, when there were a number of short outages in a row, all attributed to network issues. Someone else in my area pinged me during these to see if I was also experiencing the same problem, and of course I was. So thanks, Michelle, for checking in. Great news on the speed department, at least for downloads. The average was back up again to 114 megabits per second after a bit of a slump in February. Hopefully it stays up there in that range going forward. That said, the average was helped by quite a few great speed tests in the 200 range. More typically, my speeds were in the 50 to 100 megs range with a median of 99 megs per second. Definitely nothing to complain about with that. Upload speeds have stayed a bit on the low side though, with an average of 7.7 megabits per second. Tim Jackson in Australia asked me about the upload speed, so there it is, Tim. Here's a curiosity though, as a bonus metric if you like, the distribution of upload speed tests is quite skewed towards the low end, as you can see here. The highest I recorded in March was 21 megs up. Lastly, ping. Latency improved a little bit this month, bringing us down into the 47 millisecond range, which is great and good to see. Well, that's it for my March and 1-year anniversary report. Hope you found this video interesting. Thanks for watching.